I'm Jami Shapiro, and welcome to Grandma Has ADHD. I'm a certified senior move manager and owner of Silver Linings Transitions, where I help people navigate life's big transitions. But here's the thing, I spent years helping families move through change while completely missing the pattern that was running through my own life. I'm the daughter of 2 ADHD parents, the mother of 3 ADHD children, and yep, I have ADHD too. For years, I didn't have the language or understanding for what that meant. But becoming an ADHD coach and specialist, that's been absolutely game changing. Not just for how I work with my clients, but for how I relate to my family and honestly, for how I understand myself. I even wrote a book about it called This Explains So Much. This podcast is for all of us who are discovering ADHD later in life. Each week, I bring you conversations with industry experts and people sharing their own ADHD journeys, real stories, real strategies, and often a little too much information. If you're loving what you're hearing, please share this podcast, leave us a review, and find me at jamishapiro.me. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. Whether you're over 50 and just getting diagnosed, or you're recognizing patterns you've lived with your whole life, this is your space to navigate ADHD with others who get it. So grab your coffee and get comfortable and let's dive in. A little while back, This Explains So Much came out in audio format, and I don't think everyone caught it. So consider this your gentle reminder. Since the book came out, I've heard from so many of you. One listener told me, I feel so seen. This book explains so much. Another said, it feels like a knowing nod from a friend who gets it. The honesty, the humor, putting words to things you've felt for decades but never quite named. If you've ever wondered why your mind works the way it does, why you do the things you do, this book is for you. And you can listen to it in my own voice whenever and wherever works for you. Head to Amazon and search This Explains So Much to grab the audiobook. You are going to love today's guest. She is a licensed clinical psychologist with a specialty that feels like it was made for this community, diagnosing and supporting adults with ADHD and autism, with a particular passion for getting those diagnoses right for women and girls, and for the people who've been overlooked for far too long. Dr. Karen Albert-Saporito is the founder and clinical director of Integrative Psychology Associates of South Jersey. She earned her PhD from what is now Drexel University, completed her internship at Nemours Hospital for Children, and has spent her entire career in independent practice, including performing over 10,000 diagnostic evaluations. That's not a typo, 10,000. But what really lights me up about Dr. Saporito is the work she's doing at the organizational level to change how ADHD gets diagnosed in this country. She's a board member of APSARD, the American Professional Society of ADHD and Related Disorders, and she currently serves on the APSARD US Guidelines Task Force, helping develop nationwide standards for adult ADHD diagnosis and treatment. She is also co-chair of the APSARD Women and Girls Special Interest Group, which, I mean, could this woman be any more of our people? She is a fierce advocate for equity in diagnosis, a mentor to other clinicians, and someone who genuinely believes the journey of self-understanding can be safe and fun. Dr. Karen Albert-Saporito, welcome to Grandma Has ADHD.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
I'm excited to be here.
I have to ask you, how does it feel when you hear your bio?
Weird. It is weird. It's just funny because I'm just me, and I don't have any. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I don't have a picture of myself about how other people perceive me, and so sometimes everything feels sort of like an act. But I've done all those things, and that's what I continue to do. So it's real.
Yeah. So
it's just funny.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is very real. I struggle with it also, and I'm used to reading bios like yours. And what I find is there are 2 camps. Usually, there's this overaccomplished, all of these designations or degrees, or you have the people who just, really didn't get it together because they didn't have that drivenness of what you and I have. But all of us seem to have that imposter syndrome. It's fascinating to me. I mean, I feel like when you understand ADHD, it's like getting a playbook. It's like, okay, can I check this off for you? But I tend
Yeah.
to dominate conversations. I'm working on that. So that's something I know. What would you like to share with us?
I don't know. I do better with questions. I mean,
All right.
which I help other people with too. So I understand. I don't know. I mean, I love what I do. It's really super fun. And it's a difficult field to be in right now because it's so ever evolving and changing. So it's very difficult for people to understand what's real and what's not, what's science and what's clinical consensus and what's just an individual's experience or something that's not ADHD or autism and has been kind of adopted as such. So it's an interesting, fun time to be in the field.
Okay, so I do have a question. I usually
Yeah.
ask all my guests, so I should ask you, and that is, how'd you get here? Like, how did you end up deciding that you wanted to pursue ADHD and autism?
I think it's a great question. I think it's really important to just how I see what I see. I didn't get introduced to ADHD or autism until my clinical internship at Nemours Hospital for Children. And I had an unusual internship in that it's a hospital-based internship and it was in health psychology. And we had rotations in lots of different things. So we'd have a rotation, three different departments kind of at a time or specialties. And we had an early developmental disorder specialty, like an early intervention where I learned about autism. And we had an ADHD rotation where I learned about ADHD. And I think that's still very rare that people get taught these things intentionally. And then I just went on to practice clinically. And I did so many of those evaluations because I did just raising kids and doing my thing and liking working on my own. I did all of those thousands of evaluations because I was doing one and done evaluations. And a lot of them were for Social Security disability. So I saw people across a lifespan. And I was able to diagnose, I had infants doing developmental assessments on up to dementia screenings and evaluations. And just doing all of those evaluations means that I, developed a kind of database in my brain for patterns and have pattern recognition. So as I continued on, and then as my kids got older and I saw signs of these things in my kids, I learned as I went. And then it really helped me too when I was started to do more therapy with kids older adolescents and adults, and really spent a lot of time trying to understand people's thinking and processes and teaching people what words to use to describe their phenomenological experience of being them helped me learn what their experience of being them was about. And so it's been a journey kind of parallel to science and my personal journey and all of the evolution of the internet. Everything has really been changing nonstop.
Sure.
So,
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your discovery and then just a little bit more about little Karen, because again, we're late life discoveries. So, now we put the
mhm.
pieces together, we're like, oh, it was there and it was there.
Yeah. Well, I have two sons and they're in their 20s. I mean, mid to late 20s. So that, where that puts me age wise. So ADHD wasn't diagnosed in a lot of people when I was growing up. I mean, I never heard of it really. And much less adults. We've only been diagnosing adults for maybe 25 years commonly, and commonly meaning it's not unheard of. More recently it's much more common. But so doing those rotations and then seeing what my kids were doing, it was kind of a nonstop battle of I can't diagnose everybody and I have to be evidence-based and what am I looking at here, and I can't jump to conclusions because anybody who has ADHD, especially women, has a constant need to prove themselves and eliminate all of the self-doubt before you can express your opinions and views. So, I mean, seeing my kids develop and then learning about adult ADHD and from some of the old guard, reading the Ellen Littman's book with Patricia Quinn and Kathleen Nadeau, and saw Sari Solden teach, and then started seeing it in myself because I knew that once my kids were diagnosed, that it was likely there was a good chance that I was probably in that spectrum somewhere. So it just happened that way. And then so I got myself diagnosed. I mean, I went to an ADHD specialist. I was like, I do this testing all the time, so I can't take the tests. But as we know, we can diagnose adults with background interview and looking at their current functioning and their history and such. And it's very hard to remember things as a kid. And I've gotten information from other people. Like one of my friends said, yeah, I would ask if you wanted to hang out. And you'd be like, nah, I'm reading. And I was like, oh, did I? Like, I didn't remember that. And it's funny because I just found my diary just like a month ago
Wow.
and I was like, I have to be careful reading this and see how this goes. But as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm trying to organize my room and making goals and getting it together. And I was like 10 or 11. So I was like, if I only had this early, if I had seen this, like, I don't know, 20 years ago,
Mhm.
probably maybe would have gotten diagnosed a little bit sooner.
Right. When I was at the
Yeah.
neurodivergence conference, one of the people, she was like a principal or something. She had ADHD and she got out a binder, and it was like and, for those of you who aren't seeing it, Karen just had a big grin because the binder is like as disheveled as a binder with someone for ADHD could be. And I was always getting the trapper keeper or thinking this was going to be the thing that was going to work for me. But when she
Yeah.
pulls up the binder in front of everybody and everybody laughs, and I'm glad you bring up the not remembering, even how you
Oh
were,
yeah.
because I've had people say, "Oh, you did this." I'm like, "I did," and it's gone.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is hard to go back. I've also had people say that they found old report cards. I remember my report cards because I got in trouble for them by my wicked stepmom. But we're not going to go down that tangent. But
Yeah, I
oh,
found report cards along the way, and I got them out to show my kids intentionally because I didn't get all A's all the time.
mhm.
And I have a lot of, and I have a PhD, so my kids getting bad grades, I always wanted to make sure they understood that I didn't, as long as they were doing their best, I didn't care. But it was funny. It was always funny getting out my old report cards and looking at the comments, which is how part of how I do adult evaluations, because
Wow.
people don't, I mean, if you see somebody who's very smart and go in a private school, there's not going to be a lot of comments about their behavior and in attention stuff. They're going to have very individualized attention, and they're going to teach them where they're at. And so you have to do a little bit of a dig. So yeah, I found my
So
talkative a pleasure to have in class, but doesn't let other people answer kind of stuff.
oh, that sounds like my report card, which is why I said
Mhm.
I'm working on not interrupting you and letting you talk more than I do.
Zoom has been wonderful for showing how hard it is to not interrupt people. It's a whole new world.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, what's the point of getting diagnosed later in life?
Oh, so much. It is so healing. It's a journey, and everybody's journey is different. And it depends on how much research they've done. It depends on how much perfectionism they have. I mean, people come to me for diagnoses. And so when they're ready, they want them. But a lot of people come in just for therapy or to see, why they're having a hard time, and they may end up with a diagnosis. But it's never too late because it helps people to understand that this is a biological process. It helps, I call it your operating system. And it helps people to remove like the stigma and understand that these are not things that make them a bad person. Most people that I know who have ADHD or who are neurodivergent are just getting up every day trying to do the best they can and figure out how they're supposed to act or what they're supposed to do. So it does remove a lot of shame, especially if you do therapy and kind of unpack stuff after diagnosis. And of course, therapy helps you to learn strategies and such. But I feel like the most important part of diagnosis is just unpacking who you thought you were and reframing that in a more positive way. And it's a huge, huge challenge, especially for, perfectionistic women, which lots of us are.
So, I have a question, and I've actually never asked this before, but you're here, so I will. So, my diagnosis came alongside of my child who was 14 at the time, who was being seen by a psychiatrist. And, I had to go in and answer a series of questions. And it was funny because when Will came to me, I said, "You don't have ADHD. You've been reading since you were 3." Because I couldn't sit still in school to learn to read until second grade. And I did have an ADHD half brother who had to be put on Ritalin. And so I'm like, "You don't have that." So I'm sitting
Hmm.
in the psychiatrist's office and he's asking a series of questions. And I looked at him and I said, I'm answering more yeses for me. Do I have it? And he said, I mean, I've always counted that as my diagnosis. Does that count, or should I be doing something else?
Okay, so I don't want to tell you you should go somewhere else, because if you know you have ADHD at this point,
I
and
mean,
if that doctor gave you, did that doctor treat you?
he did not treat me. I have since I'm actually, just I take Wellbutrin because I had gone on Wellbutrin before I knew I had ADHD when I was struggling with some anxiety, going through divorce, starting a business, and I knew I actually had just said that I had ADHD and I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to impact me. And she said, no, this should help. And actually, my doctor was on it as well. And so my general practitioner saw me for several years and gave me the Wellbutrin. And so that is what I take, which I know is an off label. So I have never, taken Ritalins or any of the other Vyvanse or any of the other things. I just take the Wellbutrin, which I feel has helped me.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, they call it third line treatment for ADHD because it works on the same neurotransmitters as the stimulant medications. It's just more of an everyday med and it's a more subtle effect, but absolutely is a good med for ADHD. You don't have to go people can get a diagnosis of ADHD by somebody who knows what they're doing. And especially if there's sometimes pediatricians can diagnose, neurologists can diagnose, psychiatrists, psychologists, and other people can diagnose as well. You just have to have the education and training and experience to understand what you're looking at. And so there's not one way to diagnose. We don't have biomarkers for ADHD. So, you can't do a blood test. You're not going to do a functional MRI and get a diagnosis yet on an individual basis. We do use that data and aggregate it to look at big data like metadata to see the differences in brains between somebody with ADHD and somebody without. But so diagnosis is really based on history and presentation. If do you meet all the diagnostic criteria across settings, meaning it's not just in one place that's super structured, or not in the place that's super structured, it's only in the place that's unstructured. If it's just one setting, then we have to evaluate, is it just something about that setting that's bringing that out, or hormones or something? But we want to look at the lifespan and see, has this occurred over the course of somebody's life? Is it impacting somebody's functioning? And somebody's functioning is impairment in what they need to do, and that includes the ability to have good self-esteem and distress that impacts relationships. So if you have a good understanding of ADHD, yes, you can go through an interview and get a diagnosis, and it's perfectly appropriate. But that's part of why we're doing the guidelines, so that we can standardize assessment and people can believe their diagnosis. Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, somebody, my doctor or therapist said I have ADHD, but I'm not sure if that was a formal evaluation. So there's different ways to do it, and some evaluations are more formal than others. So
Sure.
I answered your question.
Yeah, and I mean that's been one of the confusing things. It's like, there isn't
Mhm.
you think you have it, this is what you do next. I mean, people come to me and I'm like, but one of the things that I have learned is that you have to find somebody who did receive training in adult ADHD, which is few and far between. That's at least what I'm and Dr. Saporito is nodding her head, yes. And that seems to be
Mhm.
consistent with I've had Maggie Alexander, Dr. Michael Inns. Like it just seems to be consistent,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Dr. David Goodman. Okay, so you had mentioned that how
I want to just add something real quick.
sure.
And it's also important that whoever does a diagnosis also has the capacity to do a full differential diagnosis in terms of like psychiatric diagnoses, because a lot of things look the same and there's a lot of overlapping like symptoms or traits across all kinds of disorders. So that's just important it's not just that somebody can recognize the ADHD symptoms. You also have to know how to differentiate from other things and how to arrive at whatever the diagnoses are that would be appropriate, you
That's a
know?
really good, and that actually is a great segment too. One of the things that
Yeah.
you had said that you're doing, and I haven't had a lot of guests who've talked about autism. So
Mhm.
that's just such a good segue to get to, what can you tell us about, especially women with autism, because again, that presents really differently too, just like the
Mhm.
ADHD.
Well, the difficulty in identifying women with ADHD are the same difficulties that occur trying to find women who are autistic. And when I say find, I mean trying to determine if they meet the criteria, because women are socialized differently and present differently. And just like when we had previously talked, we were talking about the whole, you met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Same thing goes for autism. So everybody is still very individual. And any of the criteria for each of these conditions can present differently across the lifespan, across levels of intellectual functioning, across whether or not somebody's got trauma. But gender roles are very impactful in society. Girls and women, we're socialized to behave, to not interrupt, to be calm, to get good grades, to be nice friends, to remember how to send a thank you note or whatever the manners are. And it's much harder for a lot of women with ADHD to have that emotional regulation and self control. But society really pounds into us how we're supposed to act. So, and it's very hard for a lot of people who are neurodivergent to feel so different from everyone else. So there's a lot of pressure to conform. And so I see a lot of people, most of the people that I see who end up having an autism diagnosis as well have really studied behavior. And I have to give you, I just want a little caveat is that I specialize in people without intellectual disability. And so there's such a broad range of how autism and ADHD are expressed across different levels of intellectual functioning as well. Everybody's so unique and individual, but the whole concept of masking or camouflage, as it was called previously in the world of autism, is rampant in ADHD as well, because society has rules for how we're supposed to act, like to be feminine, to be somebody you want to date or be in a relationship with or whatever. If we're a CEO of something, we're not allowed to be aggressive or assertive, then we're being bitchy. So there's a lot of rules for how we're supposed to act. So because of that, people want to behave in these ways to get approval or to be nice or to be liked, to fit in. But then people see themselves in these ways too, and they lose sight of who they actually are through this process of masking or camouflage. So to answer your question, women who are autistic and have ADHD often have similar issues. Like they may be perfectionistic. They may think in an all or nothing way. They may really want to be like everyone else and be defensive about, saying, well, is this natural for you? Yeah. Oh, I'm very organized. Yeah. I'm never late for anything. I don't pay any bills late. But also the whole idea of autism is we have to look at people's relationships and understanding of relationships. And people who arrive at adulthood undiagnosed with any of this often, like I said, have studied and tried to figure out what are the rules for how to act. And so they do those things and they think of themselves in, they may be very social, they may be very friendly, and they may be very good at socializing, but it also may be very intentional. They may have learned and figured out a set of rules for how to act, and they may be very rigid or inflexible in how you're supposed to act. And then also mad at other people if they break a rule. So it's looking at patterns and thinking that go along with an autism diagnosis or with autism as a condition. It's really kind of peeling back the layers and defining what we're looking at as you go through an assessment, because how people see themselves and their level of insight and ability to observe themselves from the outside is different from with everybody too. So that's why, looking back, I don't remember some of the things that people said about me. But when I ask other people, well, what did your report card comments say? Or what was it like for you to make friends when you were a kid? I get more if I ask more in-depth questions and peel back those layers. Because if I just give somebody a checklist, they're going to be like, oh, no, I'm fine with making friends. Oh, no, I'm good with change. Everybody says they're good with change. They're very good at being spontaneous. But when you really look at what that means for them, a lot of times I find that people are like, I didn't have a choice in childhood. I had to go along with what the family did, or I would get into trouble. But if they have trouble with their morning routine, they don't feel right all day, and they have to go back and make sure that they do it or figure out a better routine and stick to that. And like, that's not necessarily spontaneity.
Mhm.
Although it really is different for everybody. I feel like I have to be a detective and figure out what people's definitions of things are to
Mhm.
really get to know them. So, I don't know, did I answer that? Everything's complicated.
Yeah, I think that might be just the title of the episode. Everything is complicated, right? So
Everyone. Yes.
yeah, because I don't know a lot about autism. I'm learning more because it seemed I was just at the neurodivergent conference, and this was something that someone said to me that had just recently been diagnosed with autism. She said that it's when you start to treat the ADHD, you start to see because the ADHD has been so strong, you start to see the autism. And her comment to me was that about 30% of people with ADHD also have autism. I am not a doctor. I don't play one. I'm asking the doctor.
Yeah, but you can read, and there's a lot of information on the internet, and it's okay to have opinions and put things together. It gives us more information when we look at what we hear on the internet and all the, I mean, people having access to research. Autism, when we're looking at autism, we're looking at somebody's concept of what relationships are and social communication, social interest, the nuances of social interactions, how much they want to have social interactions, how good they feel at it, how intentional it has to be. You want to also look at somebody's patterns in thinking. Like and I'm trying to make it
Very
just,
general. Yeah, I
yes.
guess.
But, when we're looking at repetitive behaviors, there's a lot of negative language too. So I try not to do that. But when we're looking at repetitive behaviors, it's like those hyper focused interests that people talk about with ADHD, looking at how much somebody gets into, a rabbit hole about their interests. If they're collecting things, if they're that, and that goes along with doing things repeat in a repeated way too. People developing routines, collecting things, getting really, really involved in the details of something, sometimes to the point of having trouble getting the big picture, like missing the forest for the trees. Understanding those kinds of sayings is also part of it, which is super
Mm.
fun. And because the patterns in thinking also people can be very literal. So I don't know if did you grow up, did you read Amelia Bedelia books when you were little?
I did not. My kids may have, but even if I
Well,
read them, the chances of me remembering.
the thing I love about Amelia Bedelia books and why I bring them up is that I'm in my 50s. So
Yep.
people younger probably won't remember them. But Amelia, the fictional character, but Amelia Bedelia was like a mommy's helper or something. She clearly worked for a very wealthy family, and they would leave her lists of things to do in the morning. And she would like take care of the kids and take care of the house and do all the things. And so the top of the list might be draw the drapes. Okay, just picture a big fancy house, big heavy drapes. So she drew a picture of drapes. Okay.
Got it.
So it was kind of like a play on words, but she's
Right.
the best example of literal thinking. And if people universally remembered her, like I have a set of the books in my office I try to show people, especially when I was diagnosing kids. I haven't been diagnosing kids that recently, but looking at literal patterns in thinking. And all of these things interfere with people's ability to figure stuff out and feel like they're doing okay and feel like they're fitting in. And it's just kind of looking at how hard if those things are there, how much they impact their functioning. So the same kind of way with ADHD. And they overlap a lot in terms of percentages. I default to we haven't diagnosed we're not really great yet about how much we're diagnosing adults with ADHD or autism, and how good we are at diagnosing girls and women, or how good we are at diagnosing people who are not, binary gender, or different minoritized populations, because there's all kinds of cultures and community ways of being that might be expected or ignored or whatever. It's just hard to find people. So find people that aren't traditionally presenting like a hyperactive young white boy, or the criteria for autism also really were more focused on how little boys may present. And it was just little boys who are presenting in a more stereotypical way for autism. So I don't think we're capturing enough people yet. I don't feel like the statistics are accurate. So I still think that we're underdiagnosing. But when you look at the literature on the co-occurrence of ADHD and autism, you find a lot of different numbers, and it depends on how they're looking at the studies. It depends on if it's a meta analysis where they're grouping together the studies, that they can kind of figure out the common denominator and be able to compare them. It's trying to look at these big pictures of what the data is, and you really get a wide range of answers when you do that. Ask me in 20 years and I feel like we'll be much better at how many people really have ADHD and autism who are girls or women or adults, and then we'll have more accurate numbers. But I think there's a lot more overlap than 40%.
Okay. Well, I said 30. So,
Oh, 30%.
so
I
okay,
do.
we're gonna take a pause. You actually that is gonna be such a good segue of a question that I want to ask you is what do you see happening? But don't answer it yet because I want people to listen as I share, this podcast, my book, my work does not pay my bills. It is my passion, my hyperfixation. And so I insert commercials for Silver Linings Transitions, which is my move management and home organizing company. And then I also talk about the Sparkler Society, which I don't know if I had shared this with you, Karen, but it came after my book when I realized like we do well in community and you've got the whole generations of women discovering ADHD. And it's like, now what? How do we navigate the world now? And which is actually great to what I want to go into. So we're going to pause. I'm going to ask you, like, what do you think is going to happen? How is the world going to change as we're learning more and more that women and girls have ADHD and autism? And then I'm also going to ask you the button question, which I ask all of my guests, and that is if you could turn off your ADHD by pressing a button and it'd be gone, poof, never had it, gone, never have it again, would you? So we're going to take a pause. We're going to come back with Dr. Karen Saporito. And she is, again, the clinical director of Integrative Psychology Associates of South Jersey. So we'll be right back. I used to dread visiting my mother. Because of the clutter, the piles, the chaos, we all experience clutter differently. For me, it was a source of anxiety and stress. I'd try to help and she'd get defensive. We were both frustrated and it was destroying our relationship. Then we discovered something that changed everything. My mother had ADHD and she'd been living with it undiagnosed for over 76 years. Suddenly, it all made sense. The clutter wasn't laziness. The disorganization wasn't a choice. Her brain was wired differently, and no amount of willpower or traditional organizing advice was ever going to work. That discovery became my life's work. It's why I started the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. It's why I became an ADHD coach and specialist. And it's why I am so passionate about helping women like my mother and maybe like you. Because here's what I know. Clutter affects us emotionally and physically. It damages relationships, it creates shame spirals, and the overwhelm of not knowing where to start keeps you frozen. But it's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's brave. If you're in the San Diego or Coachella Valley area, my team at Silver Linings Transitions can come to your home. We'll help you tackle the clutter with compassion, not judgment. I also work with women virtually through one-on-one ADHD coaching. And if you are overwhelmed with clutter, I can connect you with trusted resources in your area. Visit jamieshapiro.me to get started or grab my book, This Explains So Much, on Amazon. My mother and I got our relationship back. You can get your peace back too. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. Moving can feel overwhelming, whether you're downsizing, relocating, or helping a loved one transition. There are so many decisions to make, details to handle, and emotions to navigate. At Silver Linings Transitions, we believe every move should be magical, not stressful. We're more than movers. We expertly guide you through the entire process and do our best to alleviate your concerns. From the moment we meet, you'll feel comfortable because we will listen to your needs and wants and work together to create a personalized plan that honors your memories and your cherished belongings while helping you embrace your next chapter. We visit your new space and create a detailed floor plan, ensuring your furniture and treasured belongings will fit safely. We handle the logistics so you don't need to worry about anything, from sorting and packing to coordinating the sale and donation of unwanted items. Our professional team uses efficient, eco-friendly bins and handles every detail with care. We coordinate with our vetted moving partners, oversee the logistics, and ensure nothing is left behind, even packing your refrigerator items. Here's where the magic happens. We don't just unpack, we recreate the feeling of home. Using photos from your previous space, we thoughtfully arrange your furniture, hang your pictures, and set up your kitchen and bathroom so everything feels familiar from day one. When you walk into your new space, it's not just moved in, it's home. Your coffee pot is ready, your favorite photos are perfectly placed, your bed is made, and your new chapter begins with comfort and joy instead of chaos. This is how Silver Linings Transitions makes moves magical. We handle the emotional lifting and the logistics so you can focus on what matters most, settling into your new home. Because every move deserves a silver lining. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro. I am an ADHD coach and the founder of Silver Linings Transitions, where we do home organizing and move management. And, I did not know that I had ADHD for years. And I remember personally hiring an organizing company to come in and help me because I could just never get it together. And it really wasn't until I understood ADHD and its impact that I realized why. And so I wrote a book, This Explains So Much, Understanding Undiagnosed ADHD, because I just feel like there's so many answers that people don't even know that they're looking for, especially generations of women who grew up thinking that ADHD was just for the hyperactive little boy. It turns out it's not only a body that can be hyperactive, but it can be a mind that's hyperactive. So you can have a wonderful day and you can have something wonderful happen, and then that one negative thing that happens is going to be the thing that takes you into that spiral, and it's going to be keeping you up at night, and you're going to be ruminating on it. And I think that, we as women carry so much shame and so much how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to have it together. And I remember that was the case for me. I remember, how is it that all of these women have so much consistency and their kids get the sticker charts and everything seems to run well, and I'm the one that's missing parent-teacher conferences and my house, is always in chaos. And then again, that negative self-talk. So my mission is really to educate people who have no idea that ADHD has the impact that it does. And it's to connect you to other people who get it and who will make you feel that you aren't alone, you're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not too much. You just have a brain that was wired differently. And I can't wait for you to join me in the community that I'm building, the workshops that I'm creating, the book club that I'm hosting, because I know that I am going to make a profound difference in your life. And we are back with Dr. Karen Saporito. The first question is a fun question. Would you press the button and not have ADHD?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
That was a very easy. A lot of people will give me like
Yeah.
might want this, but not want this. But I've only had one person so far say they'd press the button, which is pretty amazing. Given
Oh,
that
that's
we're
awesome.
quote unquote disordered, if you, listen to
Yeah.
the title. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You said something and I'm so glad you brought it up because, from what I understand, about 80% of people who have ADHD do not know they have it. And it feels like every day more and more people are discovering that it isn't just little boys and, it's them and it's us, it's women, it's girls. What do you see happening?
Well, big picture, I think there's a broad evolution in how we are conceptualizing developmental conditions. Um, and there's a lot of shifts in the field and in society that have helped that to happen. So our diagnostic manual, DSM, is they're in, I don't know where they're at with it, but there's DSM-6 committees being formed. We couldn't diagnose ADHD and autism together in somebody until DSM-5 when in 2013.
Wow.
So it was when I learned about autism, it was you couldn't diagnose ADHD in somebody you were diagnosing as autistic. As I worked with lots of people, that made complete sense to me, because how I was like, oh, that's because ADHD symptoms and traits are kind of under that autism umbrella, and it goes along with it, and it's kind of a given. And I don't know that that was the intention, because there's totally separate criteria, but it made so much sense to me, because I was seeing people, and the way I was taught to do evaluations, I assess for everything and everyone that I see. Initially, like, I'll do a broad screening, and I think most people do a broad screening, but having experience in diagnosing and supporting kids and adults makes a big difference, because it's easier to see ADHD and autism traits in kids often. And then by the time somebody reaches adulthood, there's a lot more masking and social behavior that makes it, and a lot more psychiatric conditions that co-occur with all of this difficulty growing up and seeing yourself in these ways. So I think that both of these conditions have been were the research and how society has been is that men have been the researchers and in charge of the money. And I'm making a broad generalization, because I know this has changed across the years, but in society, there's still a glass ceiling for women, and men are more often in positions of leadership and hold the purse strings for things. But being able to identify these conditions in girls and women has been hard, because the research subjects were in the past largely boys. And then recognizing that this isn't just a childhood thing and people don't grow out of it, like, so that was a big step. But then along the way, we've had social movements that have said, like the disability rights movement, saying nothing without us, nothing about us without us, has been kind of parallel also to the development of the internet. It just occurred over the same 20, 25 years or so. And as I think about these things, I did a little bit of a dive, and I mean, user generated content on the internet has only been 20 years. So, and it's very hard to remember the time before that, unless you're our age and, we had encyclopedias and things, but when we had to go to the library and use card catalogs, we didn't have a computer in our hand or in our home even. So I think that our, human beings desire to quantify things and have numbers on things and to put things into a box has made us, I think there's been too much artificial separation of these categories. And there's also difficulty accessing science. Like, open access to science has also happened along the way over the last 20 years, because again, we have the internet. And so there's a lot of movement towards journals publishing studies that everybody can read. And if they're not open access, then only people who are academics can access them, unless they spend thousands of dollars to pay for access to these databases, which most individual practitioners or just people on the street aren't going to do. So it's been kind of gatekeepy. But as I've been immersed in seeing kids and adults and seeing both of these conditions, and I really get into just somebody's experience of being them, and I look at the patterns and thinking, I really think that we have to reconceptualize this into a broader kind of neurodivergent spectrum, and look at traits and symptoms dimensionally, instead of just putting things in boxes and separating them completely. Because when we do that, then we're perpetuating this idea that they're completely separate. And everybody wants to do that. They want it, they come in and they're saying, but tell me the part that's ADHD and the parts that's autistic. And then people are saying online, okay, this is a sign that you have both. But everybody's so different, and they're not really that separate, because when I evaluate anybody for ADHD, I'm also assessing their sensory processing. I'm looking at their relationships and their understanding of relationships and their ability to perspective take, and all the things that people over time have been talking about. Oh, that's my ADHD. Well, some of those are autism traits that are listed under the autism diagnostic criteria. And it just goes both ways. So if I had a magic wand, I would take all of the studies that were done on people with ADHD and all the studies that were done on people who are autistic, and do them on both populations and see what happens. Obviously, I would also have representation in the research subjects too.
Okay, so it isn't frequently that somebody mentions a magic wand in an interview, and then I have one sitting next to me. So I had to just totally ADHD on you and show you my magic wand.
Love it.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. It applies to my business and to the Sparkler Society. All right, I'm going to totally ADHD on you again, and I'm going to ask you because
Mhm.
you said something about that we're able to do a lot more research because we have phones in our hand, we have a computer in our
Yeah.
hand, and when we were growing up, you wanted to learn something, you had to go to the library, you had to get, and if you had a set of encyclopedias in your house, do you miss those days?
Yes, in lots of ways. Absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's I haven't done a deep dive into the impact of having our phones on us, but we all know that it's hard to put them down and it's hard to experience life and to be bored. And I remember growing up being bored and finding things to entertain myself and finding things to do. And that was a really important skill. And, reading books that have pages on paper, that was an important skill. And I do think that our access to information immediately and constantly in these little short bursts is impacting how we think. And I am very grateful we didn't have social media when I was a kid, because that would
Me
have been
too.
hellish to see everybody being invited to a party but not me.
Exactly. That was my number. And so I had to go through that with my children. It was heartbreaking when
Mhm.
I went to my reunion and they were passing out the old letter, like when they passed the flyers out and everybody would get the flyer. I never got the flyer. And I'm like, I'm so glad. I had no idea that I wasn't
Yeah.
included. But it is
Yeah.
heartbreaking. I want to ask you, I've got two more questions for you. One is, do you think that we're going to see a rise in the incidence of ADHD because kids have the phone in their hands from a really early age and their brains are getting trained to, need that constant stimulation? I couldn't think of what I wanted to say.
I know. I mean, I know what you mean, and there's a lot of people doing research on that, and there's some good books about it. And I haven't done that deep dive because there's only so many hours in the day. And
I
this
get
is
it.
part of the good. I really, and this is part of the good part about the internet is that there's so much information that's so accessible, and that's very exciting. So I do think that there is an impact on our environment, of our environment on our brains, because we know that. I mean, when I was trained, we talked about neuroplasticity in kids who had head trauma, but we thought that it was much less of a possibility in adults. But we know now from all of the research that we've done that if you learn, for example, mindfulness meditation, and if there's good research with control groups saying that if you do for 8 weeks and you learn, how to do this meditation for 8 weeks. And they did brain scans in the beginning and the end of the 8 weeks and looked at functional MRIs and found that it changed just doing daily kind of mindfulness meditation exercises and breathing exercises changes the structure and function of your brain. So it helps your brain, the different parts of your brain communicate. So it helps your amygdala communicate with your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of us that thinks about previous learning and has an intention about how you want to act rather than being reactive. So we know that there's a lot of neuroplasticity. So it's got to go both ways. If you have constant, I mean, if you can't learn to be patient, if you don't get your answer right away and there's all this stuff available immediately, why would you learn that kind of patience or the ability to regulate yourself in between things? So is there going to be a rise in diagnoses of ADHD for that? I don't know. You're tapping into the is it overdiagnosed realm, and that's tricky. So I don't know if ADHD is going to be diagnosed more, but I definitely think that there's going to be an impact of our phone and the internet on how we think and experience the world.
I have one last question for you. Do you have any
Mhm.
more questions for me or anything you're like, I wish I had covered this or said this? That's like the worst feeling.
No, again, just a big question. No, I mean, I can talk about this stuff forever and it's really interesting. And I like, I mean, I guess this is the population. I love my job. I wouldn't change anything about who I am or the people that I work with because it's super fun. And really the heart of people that I work with, for the most part, everybody is just, like I said, just doing the best they can. But everybody's so fun and unique and interesting. And, some people are very funny, but like there's just a purity of heart in a lot of the people that I know. And no, that's important for people to understand because it's not, I wouldn't change something because it's just, if it's just how your brain works and who you are, everybody has to learn that. Every single person in the world has to learn what's good about them, what they like about themselves, what's a challenge, what they choose to learn to do better. Everybody has to learn coping and emotional regulation. So it's not that this is a broken population. This is super fun people that contribute to our society. So, I mean, that's just a really important grounding piece that is always present in how I like to do my work. And then I've been yelled at for too by people who say I'm being too toxically positive, because I'm not talking about like the gift of ADHD. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, but people want to also have validated like how tough things are. And yes, there's ways that it can be really tough to move about in the world and to exist as a neurodivergent person. And some of that is because society needs to understand us better and accommodate better. And some of it is just, it's just hard. So just that balance of removing the stigma and really appreciating that this is fun and unique and creative people,
Yeah,
you know,
I
I
love
don't
it.
know,
I
the
love it.
positive parts.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you're right. There are absolutely both. But nobody wants to hear the Debbie Downer all the time. You know what I mean? So, okay, my
Well, people
last
need to have hope. Yeah.
right, right.
People need
And you
to.
know what it is, just like the neuroplasticity, you can learn to work around the challenges and
Yes.
your strengths.
And
Um,
learn to prioritize what's important to you in terms of who
right.
you are and how you define yourself.
Yep. Okay, my last question for you is if you had to pick one ADHD hack that made your life just easier, what would that hack be?
Well, this is draws a lot of ire, but planners.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, I don't know where I learned it, but in grad school, I started using planners and I still use the same brand. But learning how to write things down and keep track of things in one place has always been great. And writing things down as I go. Like I usually write in any conversation. I'm not writing now because this is, just kind of spontaneous. But if I'm doing an intake or talking to somebody on the phone, I'm taking notes. Though I guess that's two hacks kind of. But really leaning into the planner has been good for me. And people get so upset when I talk about planners. People have like 50 planners, just like you were talking about with the binders. But when
Hmm.
you surrender, this is just how I am. So other people may not agree. But when you surrender to the planner and you make it something that that's your go-to part that's always with you, or every day you're consulting, you have a bigger picture of, like, I'm very visual, so it's a visual of what my week and day looks like, and that helps to kind of keep me grounded.
So I agree with you. I do also have a planner and I like to check things off. I've learned that a lot of people they really like to like check. There's a dopamine hit in that checking something off of the list. But I have also lost said planner. And so what now I do is I have my backup is everything goes on Google with alarms. And I learned that I've got to set the alarms, I've got to have the reminders, and I have to write it down. So that's my hack
Yeah.
on top of yours. I so appreciate your time.
Mhm.
How can people find you?
My website is integrativepsychosos.com. It's very long, but if you Google my name, you'll find it. I'm on LinkedIn. People can find me that way. If you look at my website, it will have the contact email and they can do that. But Karen at integrativepsychosos.com.
And it's Saporito, Saporito. I would even ask you about how was it to have the name Karen in the 2020s, but
Oh,
you want to answer that really quickly?
I never liked my name anyway,
Mm,
but it has been more difficult lately. So, I mean, it's fine. I've surrendered to it. And I think that people are saying it a little bit less now.
yeah. Oh, well, that's good.
My kids love it though. They're like, "Oh, you're totally Karen." And I mean, I just like, but I
Well, I
do
like
like to talk to managers, but I tell managers that when somebody does a good job, I don't like to complain to the managers, or I like to fix things, but I'm not the bad kind of Karen.
Karen. Well,
I say that a lot too.
I think you are a great Karen. I really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. And for
Thank you.
those of you who have listened, I like to end this podcast, and I'm not going to say it's toxic positivity, but it is never too late to make the
Mhm.
rest of your life the best of your life. And hopefully this information contributed to that. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Dr. Karen Saporito, for being with us. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.